Good evening, everyone. Thank you for logging in. I welcome you all to Hey Mom Chini Come session. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
Hey Mom Chini Come is the theme for today's program. This arises out of an idea that these are the times when we learn from our children, sometimes even when they are in utero. Hey Mom Chini Come is a cautionary warning given when a woman is pregnant. During pregnancy, some women develop high blood sugar levels. This condition is known as gestational diabetes. If it is poorly managed, it can also raise your child's risk of developing diabetes and increase the risk of complications for you and your baby during pregnancy and delivery. GDM management is complex in India and existing challenges are multifactorial. And today, we are covering two important aspects of gestational diabetes mellitus management. One, the treatment, and the other one would be nutritional intervention. Welcome one and all again. And I have the privilege of introducing the first speaker for today, Dr. Kala Subramanian. She's a physician come researcher from Chennai. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am. She joined MBBS in the prestigious Madurai Medical College. After graduating in 1991, she joined ESI Corporation Hospital, Chennai, worked as a medical officer at various departments. In 2003, she underwent externship clinical training in Atlanta, USA. Because of her passion for therapeutics, she pursued her MD in pharmacology from Madras University, Chennai. She has played a very critical role in STEMI India, a project, a community-based program for acute heart attack care. She was a consultant physician and researcher at ACEER Health Chennai. She is a consultant for Prameya Health Bangalore, and she has completed a postgraduate certification program in diabetology from Johns Hopkins University, USA. She is currently a consultant in EV Kalyani Nursing Home, Mylapore, and her special interests are type 2 diabetes and gestational diabetes. And she strongly believes in preventive health. Thank you so much for taking out time for us, ma'am. Now, I would kindly request you to take over.
hi Kripa.
Hello.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Kripa, for those kind words. I, at the outset, want to thank Prameya for inviting me to be part of this program because I strongly believe in preventive care, and that is what Prameya is doing. I have been associated with Prameya since the time of inception of Prameya. Even the brainstorming session, I was fortunate to be part of that. And the great work Prameya is doing is amazing because uh, it is not all about treating, it is about healing. That is what Prameya is doing. So I thank Dr. Sandhya for inviting me to be part of this. And Kripa, thank you so much for those nice words.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So I think with that, we can start the session for today. Ma'am, at the outset, I would like to ask you a very basic question, which is what is gestational diabetes and is it different from the type 2 diabetes or the diabetes which we see in elderly group? So can you please tell us the basic difference?
Yeah, very important question. So definitely it is different from type 2 diabetes. What is gestational diabetes basically? It is the high blood sugar. We know diabetes is actually high blood sugar levels. So when we identify high blood sugar levels in pregnant women for the first time, that is called gestational diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, we all know, is the regular diabetes we say that occurs in the older age group people, the lifestyle disease that we come across. Now it is no longer an older age group disease. It is even occurring in the middle age and even younger age group. But gestational diabetes is something that occurs, that is identified, recognized for the first time in a woman during pregnancy. So we call it gestational diabetes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. So we now know that there is a difference between gestational diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Now, we also know that India is the diabetes capital. So then what about GDM, ma'am? Can you please enlighten us with some of the numbers or statistics about what is the scenario in India?
So as you rightly put it, type 2 diabetes is very common in India, we know that. Unfortunately, gestational diabetes is also very common. It is not rare, and the percentage of gestational diabetes in India varies between 6% to 28% depending on the different states. And if you take Tamil Nadu, for example, it is somewhere around 20 to 22%. So on an average, in any probably in Karnataka also, it's around 20%, I can say, definitely 20% of the deliveries. So gestational diabetes in the pregnant women, that is the percentage we are talking about. It is around 20 to 22% on an average. And if you take the live births overall in the world, gestational diabetes is a blood sugar level beyond a certain limit where we call it as gestational diabetes. But there are certain high level blood sugars which are not actually gestational diabetes group, but definitely it is on the little bit higher side, that we call some hyperglycemia of some form, or probably already having type 2 diabetes and entering into pregnancy. If you take out of that high blood sugar levels in pregnancy, overall, if you take 84% is gestational diabetes in the world. So it's world over, it is very common now. And in India also, the prevalence is very high.
Okay. So from your statistics, ma'am, we understand that, if we, in Tamil Nadu or Karnataka, if 20% of the women are developing, gestational diabetes. So then are you saying that not all pregnant women develop GDM? So who should worry? I mean, is there a risk group who should be alert and taking precautions?
Yes. So basically, if you say 20%, the 80% is not affected. So who are those 20% who might develop? So we have some fair idea about who is probably going to develop gestational diabetes even before they get pregnant. So basically it is all about being obese, whatever condition that that leads to obesity in a woman, and high insulin levels. That is all it is about. So that will lead to probably a gestational diabetes when they get pregnant. So what we are talking about is, for example, we have listed as overweight and obesity. So anybody from the childhood, what I am saying is from the childhood, when someone is obese and when they become an adult and then when they go for work and then they get married and then they get pregnant, when they are obese, there is a high chance of somebody being obese becoming a gestational diabetes patient. And then if there is a family history, we know that diabetes runs in the family, some of the families, because of several factors. And there is a high chance of a woman getting gestational diabetes if there is a strong family history. And if someone had gestational diabetes in the previous pregnancy, their chance is more, I think somewhere around 27% or more in the subsequent pregnancies. The second pregnancy, third pregnancy, and the subsequent pregnancies, the chances of them getting gestational diabetes is more. Not only that, they are likely to get the gestational diabetes even at an earlier week of pregnancy. Say, for example, if the diabetes is identified, gestational diabetes is identified around 24 weeks, the first pregnancy, they are most likely to get it, and they are most likely they are prone for getting it at an early gestational age. And then pre-diabetes. What is pre-diabetes? Pre-diabetes is actually a stage before somebody gets diabetes. If a woman who is getting pregnant is not a diabetic, but already in the pre-diabetes stage, say if we say the fasting plasma sugar level, I will be again talking about it later. If the fasting sugar level is cutoff is 126 or more to be called a diabetic. If they are falling between 100 and 126, we call it pre-diabetes. Likewise, if the average hemoglobin HbA1c, that is somewhere between 5.7 and more, and not in that actual diabetic range, that is 6.5, then they are pre-diabetic. If somebody is pre-diabetic, then they are more prone to get diabetes during pregnancy. And the next one is PCOS. Now it's very common to find young girls coming to our clinics with a history of irregular menstrual cycles, facial hair, acne, obesity, all those, sometimes absence of periods for 2 or 3 months. So we do hormonal analysis and then ultrasound, and then we take the history and more. That is a PCOS condition we know, that is polycystic ovarian syndrome. Those girls are also at a higher risk of pregnancy-induced diabetes. Because again, in all the conditions what we are talking about is there is a condition in the body where the insulin secretion is high. There is obesity, there is a insulin resistance, so body produces more insulin to overcome the resistance, and insulin resistance is there. So this is a predisposing factor for developing gestational diabetes. And then delivering a big baby in the previous pregnancy, then gaining excess weight during pregnancy. And South Asians as such are more prone for getting diabetes or gestational diabetes. And by being, that's basically the ethnicity and advanced maternal age. If someone is planning the pregnancy, we have seen the increased risk. The data is showing that there is an increased risk of gestational diabetes, even if the maternal age is more than 25. 25 to 30 itself, it starts going up, and beyond 30, if the mother's age is beyond 30 or above 30, then there is an increased risk of gestational diabetes. So if you see overall in this, what one single point I want to insist is, there are several factors or risk, that is the issues that we can modify. We call it modifiable risk factors. If you take ethnicity, we can't do anything about it. We are Asians. Even if we move out of this country and live anywhere else, by birth we are Asians. That we can't do anything. But we can do so much about many of the factors which we have discussed, that obesity, then the weight gain during pregnancy, the age of the mother, and pre-diabetes, and PCOS, getting proper care before pregnancy for PCOS from the girls' teenage, and then when they get into 20s. If we do something about it, we can prevent gestational diabetes when they get pregnant. So that is the whole point, and that's what I want to insist. There are several modifiable factors, risk factors, that we can do something about even before the girl or the woman plans the pregnancy.
Yeah. So thank you for enlightening us on the modifiable and unmodifiable factors on this slide, ma'am. So now we know the prevalence. Now we also know who are falling in the category of the risk of developing GDM. Ma'am, in a clinical setup, how would you diagnose gestational diabetes mellitus at what stage, ma'am?
Okay. So going back to the question, the first question, what is gestational diabetes? I said that this is the high blood sugar level that is identified for the first time during pregnancy. So before going on to how we diagnose, it's basically, it's basically by doing a blood sugar level. And there are several ways of doing the blood test that we will touch upon later. But little bit of how it happens, how the blood sugar level goes up in pregnancy, just to understand why it occurs at a particular time of the pregnancy. What happens in pregnancy? Around 20-24 weeks, the placenta is well formed and secretes quite a lot of hormones to support the pregnancy. All these hormones are acting against the insulin. This is in a normal pregnancy I'm talking about, where there is insulin that is secreted to handle the blood sugar level. And the placenta, which is an important part in a pregnancy, that supports, that secretes several hormones that supports the pregnancy. These hormones act against insulin in any given pregnancy. But in certain people, in certain women, where we have discussed about are at high risk, like obesity and pre-diabetes, family history, PCOS, there is already an insulin resistance. The insulin is not acting properly, or insulin is secreted at a lesser level. In a normal pregnancy, the body, the mother's body overcomes the resistance offered by the placental hormones and secretes more insulin and maintains the blood sugar at a normal level. But in a predisposed mother who is at risk, the insulin resistance is already high, the insulin is not sufficiently secreted, and on top of it, the placenta is going to do its function of secreting several hormones for pregnancy, and it is going to counter the already suffering glucose system in the body. So when this is happening, the mother's insulin is not able to counter the placental hormones and maintain the blood sugar level. So usually the placental hormones action is more seen, acting against insulin and all those what we are talking about around 24 weeks of pregnancy. After 20 weeks, that is when it is going up and up and up to maintain the pregnancy normally. And that is when a mother is already having problems with the insulin secretion, insulin resistance, blood sugar level, they are not able to handle it, and that is when the blood sugar of the mother starts going up. So coming back to the question on how do we diagnose? So definitely it is a blood sugar level that is high. So we do blood sugar level check. What we actually do is, usually in the first booking itself, the doctors, the obstetrician would do a random blood sugar level. And that is the best way of, for some people, probably the sugars are already high. We don't know, maybe in the pre-diabetes range. So it might be picked up. They will have a way of doing it. But if it is normal, we usually do for detecting gestational diabetes around 24 to 28 weeks, what is called as glucose tolerance test, oral glucose tolerance test. What is that? We give glucose solution. There are several ways of giving it. There are sometimes some people give 50 grams, some people give 75 grams. Usually what we follow, there are several ways of doing it. I will explain one way of doing it. 75 grams of glucose solution is given to the patient in the fasting when the patient has not eaten anything. What we do is we take blood samples. So first we do one blood sampling when the patient is fasting. That is a fasting blood sample. Then we give the oral glucose solution 75 grams. Then we do we draw the blood at 1 hour, 2 hours, and sometimes people do at 3 hours also. So when we give the oral glucose solution, we challenge the body with 75 grams of glucose solution and then check the blood sugar levels. If it is beyond a particular level, then we call it gestational diabetes. It is not, the level is not as same as what we call diabetes in elder people, or commonly calling diabetes, type 2 diabetes. It is different. So how we diagnose gestational diabetes? By doing an oral glucose tolerance test and drawing blood samples and analyzing their sugar levels.
Okay. So from this conversation, the takeaway message would be 24th week of pregnancy is when Usually the screening is done for gestational diabetes, depending on whether a woman or a pregnant woman is predisposed with other factors. Ma'am, here I'm very curious because you explained to us the pathophysiology of a pregnant woman, the need for the placenta to overcome the insulin resistance and all that. So I'm very curious here, what exactly happens right after delivery? Does the scene change?
Okay, that's a very good question. Usually, if it is gestational diabetes and not a diabetic mother getting on into pregnancy, we are only talking about gestational diabetes here. That is the blood sugar level going up around 20 to 24 weeks or 26 weeks. Usually after delivery, the sugar levels come back, return to normal levels. But for small percentage of people, it might still be high. Generally, the sugar levels, because it is a placental hormone that is countering the insulin in the mother, usually the sugar levels get back to normal levels after pregnancy.
Okay, so that gives me a cue for my next question, which is if right after delivery, most women are found with normal blood sugar levels, is there a need to treat gestational diabetes? Should we treat it?
So, should we treat this gestational diabetes during pregnancy, you are asking?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, if the sugar levels are going to go back to normal, then why treat gestational diabetes? So we are back
Yes.
to the normal scene, right? No, just asking.
Yes, that's a very good question. So, we know that the sugar level goes up during pregnancy for certain women beyond the specified levels. It is not just the sugar levels going up and then coming down. The high sugar levels, as we all know in type 2 diabetes, that's occurring in the elderly people, causes some damage to, because sugar level is going to act on different cells in the body, different organs in the body. Likewise, in pregnancy also, it causes some problem in the mother or the infant or the fetus, while inside the mother or after delivery. So this complication could be for the mother or the child. It could be short-term complication or long-term complication. So for the mother, if you take, the mothers who are having gestational diabetes are more prone to develop high blood pressure during pregnancy. And this is developing high blood pressure may lead to preeclampsia, a situation where the blood pressure is high and they will be secreting more protein in the urine and they are more prone to develop seizures, fits during pregnancy. So it is not only the high blood sugar, it can also make the patient predisposed to preeclampsia. And because the sugar level is high, if you see the mother's blood sugar level, the mother's blood sugar crosses the placenta and reaches the fetus while the baby is inside the mother. But if you see, the insulin doesn't cross. When the high blood sugar crosses the placenta and reaches the mother, the child crosses the placenta and reaches the fetus, the baby inside the mother, the baby is exposed to high sugar levels. So what happens? The baby becomes bigger. It is deposited as fat around the tummy of the baby inside the mother's womb, inside the uterus. The baby may become bigger, and this may lead to, because the baby is bigger, it may lead to cesarean deliveries. And sometimes if the baby is big, it may lead to difficulty in normal vaginal deliveries because there will be difficulty in the shoulder, delivery of the shoulder. And so it may cause some injury. And also it can lead to some stillbirths or premature, preterm babies, and it is in the baby immediately after birth, it can cause low sugars because the baby is exposed to high sugar levels. The baby starts producing insulin while inside the mother too, because there is high sugar level in the baby's circulation inside the mother, and it induces the baby's pancreas to secrete insulin, and it is taking care of it. Once the baby is born, what happens? The sugar that is coming from the mother is now reduced. Now the baby is independent, but there is high insulin for the baby. So this will cause low sugar for the baby, and the babies develop low sugar levels. Sometimes they develop jaundice in the immediate postnatal period, and some of the babies have to be kept in the NICUs for observation for a few days till all this settles down. So these are the problems that might happen. And if you take long term for the mother who develops gestational diabetes, even though if the sugar levels come normal after delivery, that's what we discussed when the last point, they are prone to develop diabetes subsequently. They at an early age. There is data that almost 50% of the gestational women develop frank diabetes in the following 5 to 7 years or 10 years. That is a big number. Say, for example, somebody is 30 years when there was gestational diabetes. Even when they are around 35 or 37, they are prone to get the frank old age diabetes, which we are talking about as type 2. So that is one long-term problem for the mother that can happen. And if that was the first pregnancy, the next pregnancy, as we discussed, it can happen earlier, and also in subsequent pregnancies, gestational diabetes will be there. And it has been found that mothers developing gestational diabetes has increased risk of heart disease later in life at an early age. So it is an independent factor, independent risk factor, irrespective of, we know that diabetes is a risk factor for heart disease. But we now know that gestational diabetes is itself an independent risk factor for the mother to develop heart disease earlier. So these are the problems that can happen in the mother later. And for the baby, this is very important because the baby has been exposed to the high sugar levels while inside the mother. After birth, they may develop obesity. Childhood obesity is common. Adolescent age, it is common. Then later in adult life, it is common. And because they are going to be obese, they are prone for developing gestational diabetes because they were exposed to high sugars when they were in utero, and then diabetes, and then associated conditions. Because we call it as this is what is called as transgenerational problem. The mother is diabetic during pregnancy, the high sugar levels, the gestational diabetes we are talking about, because the baby is exposed to that when it is forming, they are prone to get obesity, gestational diabetes later, and other complications. And not only that, the baby, when they are formed, this is what is very, very important. When they are formed, not only the baby is suffering, the baby's eggs are formed while they are inside the mother. It is all predetermined. If the baby is a girl child, and if the baby has the girl child, that is the granddaughter we are talking about for the gestation mother, they are also prone to it. It is not only about the mother who is gestational diabetic and having complications. If the child is a daughter, a girl baby, and if the girl baby has a child, a girl baby later, that is a third generation we are talking about. They are all prone to develop and at an early age. So that is why it is very important that we recognize gestational diabetes, treat, and not only that, gestational diabetes, more than recognizing and treating, should be avoided by handling all the modifiable risk factors. If it is a girl child, right from the school going age, we have to teach them to be active, healthy living, healthy lifestyles, to avoid obesity, to be active. When they become adults, then when they get married, when they have children, they will be very healthy and have a healthy pregnancy.
Yes. So now we understood that it's extremely important to treat GDM, and it is not as simple as sugar levels going up and coming back down, ma'am. Thank you so much. Ma'am, here I have a very quick question. You can probably, answer me before we take up two last questions. You mentioned cesarean delivery as a short-term maternal complication. So, do you mean that most GDM mothers, or how many of the gestational diabetes mothers go in for a cesarean section delivery, ma'am?
See, not all women go into cesarean section. There is a wrong understanding by gestational diabetes mothers. Now we know that there is access to internet everywhere, and they read and they think that cesarean delivery is the mode of delivery for gestational diabetes patients. Not exactly. The obstetrician will decide based on the maturity of the child and the size of the baby, and because there will be frequent visits to the obstetric clinic, and they will be assessing the fetal growth also. As I told you, the big baby is one of the problem in gestational diabetes mothers. So there is a difference between what is a big baby and all those. The obstetrician will be the best person to say. It depends on the mother's pelvis and all those. Generally, we say anything above 3.5. I mean, it depends. So if there is a lot of fat deposition in the tummy of the baby, the delivery is going to be difficult. So that's what we call as macrosomia. So those patients, and if there are any other risk factors like preeclampsia, all these patients, they go in for cesarean delivery. And if the sugars are controlled, and if the baby's growth is fine, and if the obstetrician feels that the vaginal delivery is going to be possible, then yes, only a certain number of patients go in for cesarean delivery. Or if they give a chance for a vaginal delivery, then there is going to be a chance of shoulder dystocia. That is something for the obstetrician to decide at the time of the delivery, how big the baby is, how is the pelvis of the mother, all those. So it is not a rule that all gestational diabetes mothers will go in for cesarean delivery, but some percentage of women may go in for that.
That was a very reassuring answer, ma'am, because I'm sure a lot of our participants would be keen on knowing, because as soon as we think pregnancy, the next stop would be the delivery. So thank you so much for that reassuring answer. So it is important to manage gestational diabetes mellitus. And you have mentioned the various approaches to management of GDM. Can you please explain this one to us now?
So management of gestational diabetes, as I told you, I am passionate about the preventive part of medicine. The preventing a mother getting onto a stage of gestational diabetes is very important. But if for some reason, if the mother develops gestational diabetes, and that is when we see them, it's mainly about the lifestyle. Okay, so depending on the blood sugar levels that is identified, the doctor, the obstetrician, or the diabetologist or the endocrinologist would advise diet, exercise, that is for sure. And for some patients, there will be medications. What is very important here is the lifestyle, the diet and the exercise. We have a separate session on the diet. So we have a wonderful speaker following me in another few minutes. So I will leave it for her on the diet part. And exercise, I want to say specifically here, as how much it is allowed by the obstetrician. We have to be very careful here. What we are talking about is even walking every day, morning and evening, or immediately after having a meal, morning, afternoon, evening. So if the patients keep walking, keeping physically active, and being active is different from being physically active. So we have to keep moving, and that is what we are talking about, at least that. And if there are any contraindications, the obstetrician would advise So I would advise you to go by the obstetrician advice on that. Some people may be asked to be on the bed rest. If it is not the case, then the patient should be very active. If you do a blood sugar check at home after eating, 1 hour or 2 hours after eating, and then if you do a blood sugar check after eating and walking at least for half an hour and then do the sugar check, you will see the difference. So walking is very important. Some people do jogging, there are several exercise programs that is advised for the pregnant women. All those can be followed, should be followed. Any medication is only in addition to the diet and the exercise. So only diet and exercise are very important. And on top of it, if the blood sugar level warrants, there will be some medication added to keep the sugar levels under control. And what is even more important is periodic antenatal checkup. So during the periodic antenatal checkup, what we also advise the patients to come and with home glucose monitoring, or if possible, or doing periodic lab sugar checks. That's very important. Now, everybody knows about using the so we know everybody knows how to use a glucometer. I would advise anybody planning pregnancy, or if they are diagnosed as gestational diabetes, to buy a glucometer of their choice and start using of their own glucometer and periodically check the blood sugar levels. The doctor will tell you, we usually say fasting and 1 hour after food, the 3 times, 4 times, 2 times, depending on when your sugars are going up. So what is very important is diet. Repeatedly, I want to say diet, exercise, and periodic antenatal checkups where they will do the assessment of the weight, the blood pressure check, and several blood tests now and then the scan of the baby, the growth of the baby, because we have to keep an eye on the growth of the baby. Because if the sugars are, when we control the sugars, we also have to be very careful about the growth of the baby. It should not be too big, it should not be too small. Because too small a baby is also more prone to develop diabetes later, and very big baby we have already discussed. So we have to keep an eye on the growth of the baby, and fetal echo, sometimes if necessary, then the fluid levels. All those are possible only if the periodic checkups are done, the ultrasound of the trimester scans and the ultrasound is done. They will get to know about the fluid, how much fluid is there. Sometimes in pregnancy, what happens, the amniotic fluid level may go up. So that we call it as polyhydramnios. So all those are not good for a safe delivery. So periodic clinic visits, periodic blood sugar check at home or in the lab, diet and exercise are very important. And over and above this, when there is a need, the doctor would advise you on some medications. Kripa.
Ma'am, I'm a nutritionist myself, and when I looked at your slide, you have mentioned diet, exercise, periodic antenatal checkup, and medication. So, is there a point that you have put it in the order, or how is it, ma'am?
Yes. If you see, that's a very smart way of looking at the slide. If you see, the medication is mentioned as last. When we talk about management of diabetes or gestational diabetes or any lifestyle disorder, diet, exercise comes first. It is very important. And whatever is the blood sugar is high over and above the diet and exercise, then we need to add the medication, because here in pregnancy is a special situation where the blood sugar levels have to be controlled in a short time period. All we have is a few weeks. Within that time, we have to control. But there is also a risk we add unnecessary medication, and we can add only few medications during pregnancy, not only for high sugars, for any condition during pregnancy, any illness during pregnancy. There are only certain medicines that are allowed to be given to a pregnant mother, because it might cause some damage to the fetus. So any lifestyle disease like high blood pressure, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, pregnancy-induced diabetes, the first line of management should be diet, exercise, and later only the medication. So the doctor will decide, not directly asking for, I will eat whatever I want, but you give me medicine. That should not be the attitude. We have to try to take care of the food we eat, be active, and then over and above that, whatever sugar is high, definitely the doctor will add some medicine. Krupa?
Okay. So now we know that there are medications, so many medications available to treat and manage GDM during pregnancy. Is it safe to take them, or are there any, side effects associated, or should a pregnant woman be worried when she's on medications?
Yeah, very, very good question. See, there are several medicines available for treating high sugar levels, that is diabetes. But when it comes to pregnant women, as I mentioned a little while earlier, not all medicines are allowed for pregnant women. Usually, the medicine of choice will be insulin, or sometimes it depends on the obstetrician and the diabetologist. In certain stages, they might add one medicine called metformin, but it is usually insulin that is the best drug for treating pregnancy-induced diabetes.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. So now we know.
Yeah, that is safe. Yes.
So now we know about the prevalence and the complications which can occur for the mother, for the fetus, and even post-delivery. And it was very enlightening when you told us about the transgenerational complications which could occur. Ma'am, now I have a very important question. Now, if I discovered myself as belonging to the risk group of developing gestational diabetes mellitus, are there ways to prevent it? How can I do it?
Yes. So, as I told you, it is very important that we see there are several diseases in the world which we are not able to treat or cure. But there are several diseases like the lifestyle diseases where we can do something about it. Instead of, eating what we want, living the way we want, and then getting into pregnancy without even doing a checkup, and then having blood sugar levels, and then running around with several tests, and is insulin necessary? How do I prick several times? How do I test my sugars? Okay, yes, if we try everything and then still it occurs, yes, we will do. But it is something that we can prevent in many women. Especially now we are seeing in antenatal clinics many gestational diabetes patients, and occurring at a younger age because of the changed lifestyle. For example, the obesity. We see many women, especially occupational, many women are obese now. For example, in the IT industry or several other professions where there is prolonged sitting, they are more prone to become obese and overweight or obese. Obesity is, a stage after being overweight. And then eating junk food, eating whatever food they get in the place they work, that is another problem. We have to eat healthy. Healthy eating is eating a lot of vegetables. I mean, simply saying we have to eat like what our grandparents were eating and be active like how our grandparents were. And buying from the cafeteria in the place we work, what we get, the pizzas and the burgers and the sodas, the colas, whatever, and thick milkshakes, this, that, cakes. Every birthday is celebrated with a cake, a big, huge cake. So all these are easily available. Their price is less, so everybody resorts to it. So that is a very, very wrong thing to do. Even while in school, we have to teach our children, especially the girl children, to eat healthy, be active. Be active means physically active. Using a remote and, sitting in one place and playing a video game and, doing all those, not moving is not the way of being active. We have to teach our children to be, especially the girls, to be very active, Eat healthy, eat lot of vegetables, eat healthy food, don't eat junk food. If someone is thirsty, let them drink water. A very sad state, water is 20 rupees and some cola is 30 rupees. So people want to buy cola, whatever cola it is. So 30 rupees, for 10 more rupees, they get poison. They think it is only 10 more rupees. I get a 500 ml of a cola bottle. I don't know the price now. I'm just saying. So why should somebody drink? And it is a combination. Pepsi, sorry, I'm use the a cola and a pizza and a French fry. Can you imagine? That is a poison, and you get an additional at a discounted price another poison and another poison. So what happens? The body sugar level goes up and it gets deposited in the body as fat, and it is deposited in the liver. What happens? It is released into the body and the sugar levels goes up. So please eat healthy, be active, do lot of outdoor games. Now probably is not the best time to say that. Still we can go for jogging, cycling is the best. You don't need anybody else to play like tennis or badminton or whatever. Swimming is another good exercise. Be active. And driving a two-wheeler to the doorstep of a shop, that is another crime. Why don't you walk a few blocks, go to the shop and then buy something? So climb up the stairs, down the stairs, as much as possible, do whatever physical activity you can in everyday life. Then if someone is in the to be married or already married and planning pregnancy, please have checkup done with your family physician or your obstetrician, whoever it is nearby, and do a preconception checkup. And make sure that your sugars are normal, your blood pressure is normal, everything. And when you get pregnant, stay healthy. And if at all there has to be some changes made in your lifestyle, you can do that. And when you get pregnant, everything is going to be fine. Your sugars will be fine, your pressure will be fine, and you won't be at risk, and you won't throw your child and the next generation at risk. So have a preconception checkup. And if someone is already obese and has all the predisposing factors like PCOS, this, that, do periodic blood sugar check. And if somebody had gestational diabetes in the first pregnancy and the subsequent pregnancy, as I told you, most of the times the sugar levels come down to normal, but they are prone to get high sugar levels in the next 5 years and become a diabetic. And also they will develop gestational diabetes early. So continue your healthy lifestyle. And after delivery, please feed the baby. Please advise your daughters and daughters-in-law and the child, we have to tell them that breastfeeding prevents or postpones the development of high blood sugar level in a gestational diabetic mothers. And it also is very useful for the baby in terms of immunity, and it is also preventing obesity in the baby. There are data showing that breastfeeding as much as possible to the child helps both the mother and the child in terms of blood sugar level, the immunity, the obesity, everything. So breastfeeding should be encouraged, and we have to advise them to avoid obesity at any cost. And any pregnant women having gestational diabetes, delivering, and then they have to do follow-up blood test. We usually advise 6 weeks after delivery to have one blood sugar checkup, and then at least 3 years later, or I would advise every year to have a blood sugar check. It is after all a health checkup, because they are prone to develop high blood sugar levels at any point. They have to have a follow-up. After delivery, what happens? The focus shifts from the pregnant woman to the baby. So both the parents and everybody at home are focusing on the baby with the immunization and small sickness in the baby, and then the work, getting back to work and the other logistics. The mother's gestational diabetes is totally forgotten. That should not be the case. Please follow up with your physician or the obstetrician. Get your sugars checked 6 weeks after delivery, and then periodically after that. Never lose sight of it, because any gestational diabetes woman is prone to develop diabetes early and prone to develop heart disease. So this is very, very important. And for the child, as I told you, breastfeeding is very important. That is with a mother and healthy lifestyle for the child. Kripa?
Thank you so much, ma'am. So, prevention of gestational diabetes or having a healthy pregnancy starts much before, or from the time a woman decides to get pregnant. Thank you so much for reiterating that point and also giving us, very useful information on prevention of gestational diabetes. Now we come to our second segment of the program, which is the nutritional intervention. I would like to introduce our second speaker for today, Dr. Lalitha Priya. Dr. Lalitha Priya has her BSc in Nutrition, Food Science and Management and Dietetics from University of Madras. She then went on to pursue her MSc in Food Science and Nutrition, SNDT Mumbai, where she topped the university. Dr. Lalitha has a PhD in nutritional biochemistry from the University of Madras. She is a consultant nutritionist and a dietitian, a weight management expert at Prameya Health. She has a rich experience of working at multi-specialty hospitals and currently also consults at Sagar Chandrama Hospital, Bangalore. We welcome you, Dr. Lalitha Priya, for the session.
Thank you so much, Kripa.
I think you, can I see you? Thank you. So
Yeah.
let me start the session with a very basic question. So when a pregnant woman walks into your clinic with her blood work, what are the numbers you will look at and how will you categorize her as, somebody who will need a lot of nutritional intervention?
Yeah. So normally what happens is, by the way, Dr. Kala, your talk was very enlightening. I learned so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Kala. And Kripa, like you said, when a patient walks into the clinic, we normally look at the post-meal sugar levels. Sometimes it would just be that the patient has got a random blood sugar test done and they come to us with high sugar levels, or they would have gone for a glucose tolerance test like what Kala ma'am had mentioned, or sometimes it is that they come to us with the postprandial sugar levels. So the cutoff that you can see on the slide is a fasting level should be less than 90 milligrams per DL, and the postprandial blood sugar levels, which is the PPBS sugar levels, is 1 hour after the first bite of a major meal, which is like your breakfast or the lunch or dinner. So after the first bite, exactly 1 hour post that, we ask them to check the sugar levels, and it has to be less than 140. And if it is 2 hours after the first bite, we normally expect it to be less than 120 if it is for a normal person. So anyone who is gestational diabetic would have levels higher than this.
Yeah.
So,
I
ma'am,
think that answers the question.
yeah. So, yeah.
So, what are those 4 or 5 things, Dr. Lalitha Priya, that you would want every gestational diabetes mother to know? Or whenever you are dealing with a gestational diabetic, pregnant woman, what are the 4 or 5 things you would look at?
So like Dr. Kala pointed out, diet is one of the most important interventions that happens with a gestational diabetes woman. And it's important that they eat healthy, because it's not about just maintaining the sugar levels for the woman, but it's important that the baby grows well too. So most of the growth happens in the second and third trimester. The first trimester is a little dicey because women are experiencing nausea, morning sickness. So the rapid growth is happening in the second and third trimester. And that's where the family members and everybody tells them eat well and eat healthy and all that. But then eating in a country like ours where it's predominantly carbs, we are eating carbs all the time. So all our meals are either rice based or ragi or chapati, and everything is carbs. So there's no way that the pregnant woman is going to get away from eating carbs. She has to eat carbs, but the only thing is that she'll have to plan her diet in such a way that slightly the carb levels are reduced, and she increases the amount of proteins and vegetables along with healthy fats. Now this adequate healthy fats is probably again going to be only decided on the basis of the amount of weight that the girl has put on during the pregnancy. So sometimes if they start off being a little overweight or obese, and then they get into gestational diabetes, then the fats, the healthy fats as in ghee or butter, is also to be restricted. Coming to the physical activity part, we normally recommend a small walk post the major meals, 10 to 15 of a slow walk inside the house. But sometimes if there is a low-lying placenta or if there are some complications, then the patient has to be on bed rest. Then that is also decided only by the gynecologist. But we have seen that where the patient is normal and there are no other complications, then the little bit of walk that she does post every meal also helps to keep the blood sugar levels within the normal range. And of course, the insulin injections, as prescribed by the endocrinologist, have to be taken too. That is going to be only decided by the doctor.
Okay, so these are the 4 things which we can take away from this slide. So there is a dilemma when a pregnant or a gestational diabetic mother is eating. So can you throw some light on the choice of her food and what food groups she should be choosing?
So, like I told you, our Indian diet is, carbs based, and we follow something called the glycemic index to help patients choose their diet wisely. So glycemic index is basically the rate at which a food gets digested and releases glucose into the blood. And it is done on the basis of research studies, where the reference standard is glucose. A solution of glucose is given, and then you have the food which is to be tested also given to a population, and the glycemic index is derived. So we normally have 3 categories. If you see, it's either you have low glycemic index, or you have intermediate glycemic index, or you have a high glycemic index. Simply meaning the foods which are digested slowly and releasing glucose slowly fall in the low GI category, and those which quickly get digested and release glucose very quickly into the bloodstream are the high GI foods. So the important thing is we need to stay away from the high GI foods and focus more on the low and intermediate. Can you show me the next slide, please, Kripa?
Yes.
Yeah, so this would give you a fair understanding. So we have categorized the various foods as, high, intermediate, and low. And if you see glucose, as I mentioned, that is the reference standard, and it is given a number 100. And if you see white bread, which we all love to eat, are sandwiches, and it's as bad as having glucose. And if you see, all our favorite foods are there, unfortunately, in the high GI category. So unfortunately, idli is there. We love rice, don't we? So rice is also sitting right there. Upma, which is a quick snack we all love to eat. So they're all going to release glucose very quickly into the bloodstream. And if you see in the low GI category, you see most of our pulses sitting there. You have the rajma and the chickpeas, and you have fruits like oranges and apples. So they release glucose slowly into the blood. And if you look at the seems to be happily laughing. So the intermediate glycemic index, if you see, you have again protein-based snacks there. You have the chole, you have the pesarattu, and you have sprouted green gram, and you also have pongal. So if you look at pongal is usually a combination of rice and dal. So just the combination, if you see, rice is sitting in the high GI category and you have dals and pulses coming in the low GI. So just blending the two, just blending rice and dal and making a pongal automatically brings down the glycemic index. Similarly, if you look at the traditional way of eating in India, wherever there was rice, there was always a sambar. If there was ragi mudde, there was always a saru, a soppin saru. Or if there was a chapati, there was always dal. So our forefathers knew how to balance the diet and eat. But somewhere in this fast-paced life, we've lost track of vegetables and the dals and sambar in our diet. And we look at quick fixes, and probably that's the reason why, diabetes and gestational diabetes is on the rise in our country.
Yes, Dr. Lalitha Priya rightly said that the combinations, if they are smart, we can definitely choose better food-wise. So quickly moving on to the strategies of eating during gestational diabetes, what could be the basic 5 or 4 strategies to choose when you are with gestational diabetes?
So, like I told you, carbs are mandatory, and we look at getting around 60 to 65% of our calories from carbs. So, it's not going to be a low carb or a zero carb diet for sure. So let us look at having complex carbohydrates. So we should look at probably whole wheat atta for the chapatis and probably brown rice. Maybe we can even look at switching to dalia, which is broken wheat. And all these are rich in fiber and in protein. So we'll have to look at choosing the complex carbohydrates and blend it with adequate proteins. So it's important to have a big bowl of salad with every meal, at least the lunch and dinner. Ensure, like you see the plate here, half the plate is filled up with the non-starchy vegetables. So we would recommend the patients to have a lot of green fresh vegetables as salad, and if they find it difficult to eat salad, they could probably increase the quantity of cooked vegetables. They could have a clear veg soup, or they can increase the quantity of sabji or the palya. So straight away in a plate, half the quantity, the vegetables have to go up. That's also loaded with a lot of complex carbohydrates, and a small portion of the rice or the ragi or the chapati or the dalia. It's a very small quantity. There are some patients, who refuse to make a change from rice to chapati, saying they can't handle it, they find it difficult to digest, and they do have gastric issues in pregnancy. So across the board, it may not be possible for us to completely avoid rice, though that would be something we would love to do, because straight away the sugar levels come under control the minute rice is off the diet. But if they refuse, then we'll have to give them options like brown rice or dalia, but a very small quantity. And it has to definitely have 1 cup of dal or sambar or kuttu. We make kuttu in the province of Tamil Nadu. So that's again a very healthy combination of dal and vegetable, but minus the coconut. So something like that, if they incorporate on a daily basis in both lunch and dinner, automatically the postprandial spike in sugar levels are curtailed, and they are able to keep the sugar levels within the normal range. And because there's adequate vegetable and protein, the baby also grows healthy. Another very important factor is they have to eat smaller quantity of the breakfast, lunch and dinner, and be hungry enough to have a mid-morning and a mid-evening snack. So we normally give them only 1 fruit a day, absolutely no fruit juice, no smoothies. So they will have to learn to chew and eat the fruits. Again, in the fruits, it's not the high glycemic index fruits like bananas and mangoes, chicos, grapes. All these are high in sugar. So they can only look at apple or orange, or maybe a small cup of watermelon or muskmelon, or a small cup of pomegranate. We normally avoid papaya in pregnancy. So they can have a small mid-morning, maybe a fruit, and have a healthy lunch, Then mid-evening, they can have a small cup of, sprouts, or maybe kosambri, or maybe they can just have some dal, some protein-based snack, and have an early dinner. It's important that they finish off their dinner between 8 and 8:30, so that the next day, the morning fasting sugar levels are also within 90. So it's important that they don't, if they're working women, they normally tend to have late dinners. So even if they're following the diet to the T, but the timings are not well maintained, then the sugars will not come under control. Then there is another important thing, that they have to certainly avoid some foods like this: absolutely no sugar, not even a small grain of sugar, no honey. Jaggery is no good, so there's no jaggery. None of the, the roots and tubers like the carrots and beetroots and potatoes, the high GI fruits like I mentioned, no fruit juice, and tender coconut water. So I would like to just emphasize on that. I've seen a lot of patients in Bangalore. The minute they become pregnant, they say we are getting a lot of heat boils and the body is getting heated up. They instantly employ a coconut seller, and he comes home every day and supplies tender coconut to the family. And she is like literally drinking gallons of tender coconut water. The sugars will never come under control because there's lots of free glucose in tender coconut water. So there's absolutely no chance she can have juices or tender coconut water. No raisins, dates, figs, prunes. Um, Pregnant women are prone to being anemic as well. And the easiest food they can have to raise hemoglobin, according to them, is just picking up some dates and raisins. But then it's not going to help the case, because the sugars will not come down, and neither is the hemoglobin going to go up. So they need to look at incorporating a lot of green leafy vegetables and adequate proteins. Probably start having pudina chutney. Pudina is excellent in iron. So if they have a pudina chutney with fried gram, they're getting the ideal blend of iron and proteins. Instantly in a week or 10 days, the hemoglobin goes up. So small little changes to the diet, and I'm sure, they can easily sail through these few months of pregnancy. Then again, coming to the last point, where it is the fat intake. Many times the girl becomes pregnant and the family immediately starts pouring ghee on the rice, on the chapatis, on the idli, and say that no, you're pregnant, you have to eat for two, eat ghee, eat butter. So it's not that. The fat intake has to be very judiciously decided, depending on how overweight or obese the girl was at the beginning of the pregnancy, and how much weight she has put on in the first trimester. Sometimes if they put on too much weight in the first trimester, it's very important that the weight gain is controlled in the second and third trimester. Otherwise, it can lead to complications. Of course, the sugars will also go beyond control. So it's important to be very careful with the fat intake as well. Kripa?
I think Dr. Lalita Priya has covered almost all the food groups when she spoke about the strategies used to eat while dealing with gestational diabetes. In next few minutes, I'll be taking up questions from the participants, and immediately after that, we will move on to the chat box questions. And our first set of questions has come from a participant. Who are at risk? I think we have covered that point in our second slide. Stress and gestational diabetes, is there a relationship? So this question is for Dr. Kala.
So definitely stress causes increased blood sugar levels. But if you ask for a direct correlation between the stress and gestational diabetes at the time of pregnancy, it may not have a direct relationship. But if you take obesity and high insulin resistance that develops before pregnancy that we are talking about, that is what we have to address. Definitely it increases, say, in several ways, the insulin resistance, insulin secretion, glucose metabolism, and stress. Single day stress is not what we are talking about. We are talking about the chronic stress, sleeping late for several days, having stress for several reasons, that definitely increases the chance of a woman getting gestational diabetes when they get pregnant. So from that point of view, gestational diabetes, stress has to be addressed as a pre-conceptional strategy and during pregnancy. It definitely increases the sugar levels.
Yeah. So the third question is about family history, and since you have told us about the transgenerational, complications which are developed, for next 3 generations, I think we have answered that question. The fourth question is also something we are familiar. Which trimester does it exactly begin, and the physiology behind it? So, can you? Yeah, I think it is between the 22nd and the 24th week.
So actually, the third question which we have posted, a little bit of the other than the transgenerational predisposition for developing the diabetes in a family, I would also like to insist upon the family environment that matters a lot. Like I always tell the gestational diabetes mother when they are nearing term, that when they deliver, the sugars come down to normal and then they forget and they go back to their old lifestyle, like eating junk food and being inactive, and then they again gain weight. I tell them, if you eat healthy, your child is going to eat healthy. If you make whatever Dr. Lalitha was showing us, the high fiber rich diet, low glycemic index diet, if they are going to cook and give it to the child is going to eat that. For example, they speak Russian, the child is going to pick up the Russian easily. They eat junk food, they are going to eat junk food. They are going to be sitting idly in a sofa and watching TV and giving a tablet to the child to play games, it is going to do that. So family also plays a big role in the child's obesity and future diabetes. And which trimester does it exactly begin? It's usually around after 20 weeks. 24 to 28 is the maximum strain on the mother's body because of the placental hormones contracting the mother's insulin. So what is the other question? Can a woman avoid
being diagnosed with GDM? I think she's talking about the prevention of aspect of GDM, which we have covered.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Correct. Thank you so much, ma'am. I think now we will move on to the chat box questions which we have.
So I see from Richa.
Yeah.
Will the insulin on the or the high units of insulin not affect the mothers later, sooner in life? Say, when we talk about giving some medicine for anybody, whether it is a pregnant mother or non-pregnant, anybody for that matter, we always talk about the benefit risk of giving a particular medicine. And here we are talking about not only the mother, and also we are also talking about the child inside the mother. So we have to weigh the benefit and the risk of allowing a high sugar in the mother or giving the insulin as an addition to lifestyle. So definitely insulin whenever needed should be given, and it has been found to be safe, and it is not a risk for the mother or the child. What is more risk is having high sugars. So it is not that when someone is having high sugars and we give insulin, the patient had to be given insulin. Even in type 2 diabetes, when we say we have to give insulin, they will be saying, oh, they have tried all those, now they have come to the stage of giving insulin. It is not so. Insulin is the problem there, so we are giving insulin. If someone has a problem with the iron deficiency is there, we give iron supplements in the form of diet or iron supplements. Likewise, we are giving insulin. The only problem which so many patients are going on asking is it is available only as an injectable. So patients are worried. If it is a tablet, I'm not sure whether there will be 101 questions about giving insulin if it is available as a tablet, because so many patients take iron supplements. So insulin, if it is necessary, can be safely given. There is enough data to state that it is safe for use in pregnancy.
Yeah. I think we have answered Richa's question, ma'am. As Dr. Sandhya is rightly pointing it out, this question is for Dr. Lalitha Priya. Idli is also a combination of rice and dal. So how come the GI is more?
Yeah, so that's a Fantastic question. And usually, what happens with idli is it's probably the proportion of idli rice to the urad. And that's the reason why a lot of people down south use idli with more of rice and less of urad. And they get those nice, soft, fluffy idlis. Whereas in Pongal, the proportion of the dal to the rice is not so big. So it's like 1 cup of rice, and it's like about half a cup of moong dal usually used, or 1/3 cup of moong dal usually used to make a pongal. Whereas with rice and urad dal, it's 1 cup of urad dal and 4 to 5 cups of rice which is used. And sometimes it is the parboiled or the Salem rice which is already processed. So sometimes that could be the reason why the glycemic index is higher. One is the amount of carbs which is more, and also it is a parboiled rice. So the spike in sugar levels are higher with idli as compared to pongal, is my understanding.
Okay. So it is the ratio which you are saying,
It's
which
the
is
ratio,
important.
absolutely.
The
Yes,
uh,
yes.
the
The
carb
proportion.
the proportion.
Carb to protein. But I think if we smartly play around with it and we just use 1 cup of whole urad and just 2 cups of the rice, we can still, prepare lovely idlis, and the glycemic index may be low. I think so.
Yeah.
So we
So the
just have to
question
experiment.
continues, Dr. Lalita Priya.
Okay.
Kanchipuram idli, the GI is less or more?
I really don't know. I couldn't get
That is
any
the clear.
information.
Yeah, if I
Yes.
may interrupt, yeah, because
Yes,
Kanchipuram,
ma'am.
we
Hmm.
use the split urad with the husk, and
Huh.
it's almost 1:1. So there's
Oh,
one measure,
fantastic.
there's one measure of urad. So I think we should
Fantastic.
research on that, and
Yes.
I think it's a very good low GI. Should be, I think.
Should be, I'm sure. I mean, the recipe that you're mentioning, I'm sure it should be low GI. Then, if it is 1:1, and on the same note, I would like to also just, share this with all our viewers that normally I give out a recipe for adai dosai for the GDM patients, and that is again made, the traditional way, only minus the rice. So, with the 4 dals, the tur dal, moong dal, chana dal, and urad dal, and they just have to grind it and make dosai. So that is really low GI, and most of the patients have come back and given us very good feedback. So I think I need to try the Kanchipuram idli, and maybe we'll see if that also helps patients. We'll definitely try it out, ma'am. Thank you for the suggestion.
Actually, that's a wonderful answer, Lalita Priya. The making a idli or adai or whatever, peseret or whatever, it is all about the carbs. We are talking about the content of the carb that goes into that. So yeah, the adai is without rice, and of course peseret. All those are very good ideas. Patients can easily, without suffering on the difference in the taste, they can definitely make something at home and enjoy.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was a very nice, interesting conversation between the experts. Gave us a lot of information also. And there's a question from Chaitra Javali, who's asking, is there a risk to the baby if the father is a diabetic?
See, if the father is a diabetic, it is not a risk for the baby when it comes, because what we are talking about in gestational diabetes is the programming of the baby. When the baby is inside the mother, the sugar crosses the placenta and gets into the fetal circulation and causes so many changes. So what we are talking about here is the maternal glucose crossing on to the baby and causing so many problems. So from that point of view, there is no increased risk for the baby. The other risks are generally there. Yeah.
I think that brings us to the end of the chat box questions, ma'am. I would like to really thank the experts on the forum. Dr. Kala Subramaniam, who has taken out time for us from Chennai and gave us a lot of information about gestational diabetes, mellitus. The second speaker, our own Dr. Lalita Priya, who has enlightened us with various food combinations, the recipes which work for GDM, etc. Thank you so much on behalf of Prameya Health team, and we would love to hear more from you. And in case there are more questions, we can definitely answer those individually via WhatsApp or email. Thank you so much for logging in, and stay safe. Thank you all.
Thank you, Kripa, for conducting it so well.
Thank you,
It's
ma'am.
a great opportunity for me and Dr. Lalita Priya. That was a very good presentation, and
Thank you, ma'am. Thank
definitely
you. Yours.
it was very nice to hear from you all the intrinsic points. So, thank you so much, and
Much,
I
ma'am. I
thank
learned
Dr.
a lot
Satya.
from your session too. And thank you, Kripa. Thank you, Prameya. Thank you so much.
And once again, I thank Prameya for doing a great job in healing people.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Bye.